This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, this is James Mulherin from Fort Hood.
Good morning, sir.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Always
Good
good
morning,
to get
Jason.
things early and test the technology.
Jason, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. Mr. Mulherin, did I hear you report in? Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Good morning.
All right. I'm going to edit your name on the list.
Okay. I'm going to edit it.
There we go. Thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate your participation. We will be going through a freight segment for about 30 minutes, and then you're free to hop off if you have other more pressing things to do.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi, Christy.
I just wanted to let you know that Victor is going to be on the call for the first 30 minutes, but I'm going to be his proxy for the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone. For the sake of attendance, if you could please type your name into the chat box, and I will be muting all lines. If you would like to speak, please unmute your line during the meeting. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We will be starting shortly. Please sign in on the chat for your name for attendance. And for those that are here for the freight portion of the presentation, you may hop off after that segment, or you are welcome to continue to stay throughout the rest of our meeting. We'll be starting shortly. I do have a caller that is not on their computer. They are just calling in, caller 5. If that is you, could you please announce your name, please?
Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here. I'm going to go ahead, since it's 9:30, and call the meeting to order, and then open the floor for opportunity for public comment. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to comment? Seeing none, we will move to agenda item 3, which is the staff update. Kendra?
Yes, the meetings for the next couple of months are listed there on the screen. For December, we have the policy board on the 16th. We will have a joint technical advisory and policy board meeting, as well as a project overview in an electronic format on January the 13th. This will be in place of our bus tour. So more details to come to you all on this. Again, our quote project bus tour will be in a project overview format that will be electronic. The 2045 MTP Reprioritization, that call for projects closed on November the 13th. We received 59 roadway, 24 livability, and 1 transit project for a total of 84 projects received. And for air quality, we have 51 parts per billion at the Temple station and 49 parts per billion at the Killeen station. And I do apologize, the MTP schedule is not included, but we will send that out as a follow-up. That was an error on including that into the packet.
Thank you, Kendra. Any questions on the staff update? Seeing none, we will move to agenda item 4, which is an action item regarding the approval of the minutes from the November 4th, 2020 meeting. I hope everybody's had a chance to review those. If there's no questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion. I have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Say no. And that motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Our next agenda item is a discussion item regarding the regional freight transportation and parking study findings. CDM Smith is here to report on the progress of the parking study. At this time, I will open the floor for CDM Smith.
Thanks. This is Roger Hiller with CDM Smith. I'm the project manager for the freight transportation and parking study. Let's see, do I have control or do I just need to share my own screen?
We do have your slides in our presentation, but I can definitely share to you, Roger. Is that what you prefer?
I'll just share my screen. I can run through the the presentation, myself, that's fine.
Okay, I've sent the control your way.
Okay. Can everybody see this?
Yes, thank you.
All right, let me go to the slide mode. Whoops, that's the presenter view. Okay. So I'm going to go through the study itself pretty quickly. Oops. Can I minimize this? Well, I'll just keep going. I know some of you have seen this stuff already, so I'm going to go through the study itself relatively quickly. But basically, what we want to do is review the truck parking supply and demand methodology and results that we used pretty briefly, and then we're going to ask for y'all's input on the feasibility of expanding truck parking at a few opportunity and unauthorized sites that we identified during the study. Basically, your best judgment about whether they can be used to develop new truck parking. And then we want to ask you to complete a survey instrument, not during this meeting, but offline to give us that feedback. So we had a 4-step process for estimating truck parking supply and demand. Basically consisted of identifying the key truck freight corridors in the region and inventorying parking supply, and then estimating the truck flows in each corridor using several different data sources. Then calculating truck parking demand using an FHWA truck parking model, and then validating that in a qualitative fashion using the statewide truck parking study and some other sources. So basically, the first step, we essentially reduced the freight network to 7 key truck freight corridors in the region, which are the purple routes on the map. And we identified 27 authorized parking sites with 636 total spaces on those 7 corridors. Some of those are planned for development as truck parking, and others are opportunity sites. Then those supply inventory was done through a desktop review and also interviews with stakeholders. Based on that, we developed parking site profile sheets like this one for each of those 27 sites. It includes the number of spaces at each site and other key information like the amenities that are present and other data like that. So the next 2 steps were estimating the corridor truck flows. We used truck counts, the regional travel demand model, and the FHWA freight analysis framework to develop those estimates for the base and the future years. And then we applied the FHWA truck parking demand model calibrated for trucker hours of service regulations to estimate current, which is 2018, and future 2045 parking demand. So for 2018, the base year, we estimated a total demand of 791 spaces in the region compared to a known supply of 448 spaces, and that leads to a shortfall of 343 spaces. 72% of the unmet demand is on I-35, which is the major trucking corridor in the region. By 2045, we estimate demand for 1,463 truck parking spaces with a supply of 636 spaces, leading to a shortfall of 827 total spaces. And again, 92% of those are on I-35. Then we checked the demand estimates qualitatively against the TxDOT statewide truck parking study results for the Waco district. We found them to generally be in agreement. There are many existing sites in the Waco district that are over capacity, and the unauthorized parking that we found or that was found indicates an overall parking supply shortage. To sort of dig a little deeper, we looked at I-35 in the Killeen-Temple region, and since it's about 1/3 of the total length of I-35 within the Waco district, if we assume that the parking demand is proportional to that share of I-35, we would expect the peak hour demand of about 500 trucks And what we found was about 650, which is slightly higher, but reasonably close. So conclusions that we got from all this: most of the demand is on I-35, obviously, especially for overnight parking. That is the major long haul truck corridor in the region. There are some opportunity sites on lower demand corridors in the region. And the options for increasing the authorized supply and improving safety include things like identifying some alternative sites where trucks that are parking unauthorized can go, or just increase enforcement presence at the known unauthorized sites. Could also integrate, do some land use development regulations that integrate truck parking development guidelines into those land use regs. And increasing just public awareness of the overall need, and also some of the economic benefits. We did find some studies from truck stop associations that kind of quantified what the economic benefit of truck parking and truck stops is. So the immediate next step that we need y'all's help on is to assess specific sites for suitability for expanding truck parking. So we developed a survey form, which is in your packet, along with summary profiles for each site. And what we need y'all to do is complete this survey grid, which is on the screen, for each site identified here, and they're numbered here across the top. A lot of numbers get skipped because we discarded some sites just based on not being big enough or having a incompatible land use next door to the potential site. So these are the ones that were left over after that process. And what we need y'all to do is complete the survey grid for each site. The questions are mostly they're simple yes or no questions, but we would ask if you can provide details as indicated, depending on your answers for each one. That would be beneficial as well to give us more context. For example, like if there are active plans for developing the surrounding land around a particular site that might be conflict with truck parking, we'd like to know about that and what they are. If you could complete the surveys and return them to Kendra by next Friday, December 11th, that would be great. Her contact information is there on the left. My contact information is on the right if there are any technical or study questions. And that's all I've got. Are there any questions about what I just went through? I know I kept it pretty brief, so.
Thank you, Roger. I don't see any questions coming in, but just to reiterate, well, there's no action needed on this item. We're just requesting that you complete the survey form that Roger just showed on the screen for the parking sites, and get that returned to staff by next Friday, the 11th.
Yeah, and the next steps, we'd take that all that input and document it for our study and come up with some recommendations for potential areas where truck parking could be expanded.
Thank you, Roger. And we will be sending this out following this meeting in a more computer-friendly version that could be completed through a desktop easily.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Roger, if you could release your control, then I will bring us back to our meeting packet. Thank you for your time.
Sure. Just gonna. I'm sorry?
Sorry, I was trying to jump in there. Did you have any feedback? This is Jason Deckman, City Temple. Did you have any feedback from, say, law enforcement about sites where there's a problem with any illegal parking, where they have to chase the trucks away?
Yeah, we interviewed some or passed out surveys to law enforcement stakeholders, and that's where we identified most of the unauthorized sites that we know about.
Right.
So yeah, we did reach out to law enforcement for sure.
Thank you again, Roger. And I'm not seeing any other questions come in. If you do have any questions, feel free to give us a call or email staff. Moving on to agenda item 6, this is a discussion item regarding environmental justice analysis of transportation projects, study findings, and interpretation for subjective scoring. This is going to be pages 51 through 62 in your packet and is also on the screen. Alliance Transportation Group is here to present on this. And Alliance?
Thank you. This is Jim Harvey with Alliance Transportation Group. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So I guess we can just follow along with the packet. Kendra, would you advance the slides when I ask? Thank you. So basically we'll do a quick review of environmental justice, what it is, some of the most recent FHWA guidance. We'll talk a little bit about the EJ areas in the Killeen-Temple study area, talk about some profile examples, and then discuss how this process, which is ongoing, will coordinate with the 2020 project call. So the environmental justice was initiated through an executive order, and in essence, what it basically says is that any project that involves federal funds, and that includes your Metropolitan Transportation Plan, has to consider whether or not the effects are disproportionately burdensome to low-income minority populations. Next slide. And so FHWA has put out some guidance for MPOs to follow, and they've asked MPOs to enhance their ability to analyze these land use transportation interactions in terms of environmental justice in the MTP and TIP process, to identify areas that have low-income populations and minority populations that need to be considered when designing projects and plans, and then evaluate, if necessary, the MPO's public involvement process for engaging those communities in the planning process. And then finally, design transportation facilities that fit more harmoniously into the communities. Now, KTMPO has already taken some steps to implement some of these guidance from FHWA. You've recently broken out environmental justice as a separate subjective scoring criteria in your project selection process. And we're doing this study to help to do some pre-screening for that process on projects that are either interacting with or along adjacent to environmental justice areas. So if you look at the map in the packet, in your public participation process, you identified a set of criteria for identifying environmental justice areas. And we've worked with the MPO to confirm that the areas that you see in the kind of salmon color on the map are consistent with that definition, and that's areas that have 85 percentile income, family poverty, household poverty, median income range. 50% or more of the population identifies as a minority, and then 35% or more persons of Hispanic or Latino descent. We took those areas, next slide please, and we overlaid the projects from the previous MTP, the current project list, so there's about 60 projects, and overlaid those on the areas that were identified as environmental justice areas. And we've done a preliminary analysis to look at those projects and identify some issues to be discussed with the sponsors and with the scoring committee for the project call that you have out at present. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to add the new project call projects to the existing projects and do the same analysis that we've done for the existing projects for the new projects. Go to the next slide. So here's some examples of what we're looking at. I didn't identify these projects specifically because these are just examples pulled from the list, and I didn't want to end up in, having someone concerned and feeling like we needed to start a discussion on a specific project. But so, for example, this is a project that proposes to widen an existing 4-lane roadway to a 4-lane undivided roadway that transects an EJ residential and commercial area. So we're widening an existing 4-lane to a 4-lane divided with a median. We're adding curb and gutter, adding sidewalks and bike facilities, adding multimodal amenities. So at first blush, you say, well, technically it's a capacity increase in the environmental justice area because we're moving up a functional class. But when you look at the project more in terms of its actual conceptual framework, by adding a median, you're actually making the project, the roadway easier to cross and reducing barriers. Adding sidewalks and bicycle facilities, you're actually adding context-sensitive amenities that are more likely to be a benefit to the environmental justice community than a detriment. And then there are you're adding some multimodal amenities to make access to the community easier. So in essence, although it looks like, just on paper, it looks like a capacity increase in an environmental justice area, it actually falls in that last category under the FHWA guidance of making facilities more context sensitive and more in line with the communities they're serving. So this project, we're saying, doesn't really have any issues related to the environmental justice community. In fact, it potentially has some positive benefits. Go to the next slide, please. So in this case, we have a roadway that again is going through an EJ area, residential and commercial, and it's a 2-lane undivided roadway moving to a 4-lane divided roadway with a median, curb and gutter, and adding sidewalks and bicycle facilities. So essentially, although it is an actual capacity increase, you're going to 4 lanes. When you have an increase of that type, the first thing you're concerned about is, are you creating a barrier for the community to cross from one side of the street to the other? Because a median is being included, you're creating some safety islands for pedestrians. And so in essence, you're not increasing the barrier. And then you're also adding amenities like sidewalks and bicycles for circulation. So we would say that this project is at probably neutral at best, and possibly has some benefit to the environmental justice community. Now, we'd still want to talk to the sponsor about this just to make sure that the widening doesn't involve any major takings or something of that nature within the environmental justice area. But in essence, again, this is a project that doesn't really create that much concern. Next slide, please. So this is a 2-lane undivided roadway that's being expanded to a 5-lane section. It is in an environmental justice area. It's going to provide some improvements to intersections. Normally, there would be a concern here that we'd have to talk about whether or not the project was creating a barrier to moving from one side to the other. But in fact, although it goes through an environmental justice area, these environmental justice areas are identified on the basis of census block groups and our traffic analysis zones in the model. And so the environmental justice community may be concentrated in one part of the zone and the project may be in another part of the zone. And in this case, the project is actually going through a fairly undeveloped area. So there's not any impact on the existing populations. But we would want to talk to the staff and the scoring committee on how we saw growth in that area and if there were any concerns about future conditions that we wanted to discuss with the sponsor. Those are the kinds of things we've been looking at. We'll do the same thing for the project call projects. We haven't begun that yet. We're still coordinating with the staff, which is doing some pre-screening on the new projects, but we'll add the new projects in, and then we'll provide a list of projects that we think need some additional discussion to the sponsors so they can provide some background information, particularly related to whether the community was involved in helping, the EJ community was involved in helping develop the project. And then we'll also provide that information to the scoring committee so that they can use it in their scoring for the subjective scoring process. I actually probably jumped onto a couple of extra slides there, Kendra, when I kept talking, but so, and then we'll also conduct a workshop with the scoring subcommittee to support the subjective scoring process as we go along. We're hoping to have the information back to you on the new projects prior to your driving tour of the project areas. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to take those.
Any questions from Jim on that? I'm not seeing any. Thank you for that presentation, sir.
Okay.
And with that, we will move to agenda item 7, which is a discussion and action item regarding the reprioritization of the congestion management process, network segments, and interpretation for objective scoring. This is a discussion and action item, so I will let Alliance Transportation give their presentation, and then after any discussion, we can take action.
Okay. Well, this is Jim again. I'll just continue on from here. So, Kendra, if you go to the next slide. So basically, we're going to do a quick overview of the CMP process, talk about the 2020 CMP update, talk about the congestion results, and then talk about the reprioritization of projects and how all of that fits together. Next slide. So essentially, congestion management is part of the performance management program that the US DOT has put forth as under the FAST Act that basically provides us with a way of reviewing over time the condition and performance of the transportation system. And it's a systematic approach that allows you to manage the congestion on your system and provide alternative strategies for congestion management. It's a way of number one, identifying problems that should be addressed, and also to track over time how well you were doing at actually improving conditions on the roadway. What is actually the result of projects that are implemented and programs that you put in place through your MTP and your TIP and your other planning programs. The congestion management process that KTMPO has in place results in a list of roadway segments which are prioritized based on level of congestion. If you go to the next slide, please. So we want to reflect the real world changes in the roadway network that impact congestion. We want to take advantage of updated data sources, and we want to monitor the effectiveness of congestion management strategies, as I mentioned. So that's why about every 2 years, the MPO undertakes a review of the CMP and the network. So what we do to accomplish that is we collect and update data. We update the CMP network to reflect changes to data and data availability, and maybe add some new segments that make sense in the process. We calculate the congestion performance and the performance on some other measures. We revise the evaluation criteria if it's necessary. I'll just say right now, we did not revise the evaluation criteria for this round of review. And then we rank and we reprioritize the CMP segments. Next slide. So our primary data sources are what are called location data sources, the National Performance Management Research Dataset, NPMRDS data that's provided through FHWA and TxDOT, additional INRIX, which is a vendor of cell phone position data, data that we get from TxDOT, the 2045 travel demand model, TxDOT crash records information system, CRIS data, and then the actual 2018 CMP network that was developed 2 years ago that was updated from the original 2016 network. So the segment evaluation criteria is the congestion rank that's reported by through the NPMRDS, INRIX, and travel demand data. The change in the rank, congestion rank, in other words, if how much the congestion changed from previous conditions, the volume on the roadway, because congestion on a very high volume roadway has a more significant regional impact than on a minor roadway, although they're both important. Safety, so we look at both crashes in general and on rear end crashes, because rear end crashes are in the literature are indicative of cues at intersections and choke points that people suddenly realize the traffic stopped and it's too late for them to end, and they ends up with a crash. We look at transit routes because we want to prioritize congestion protocols that improve not only automobile and truck traffic, but also help transit. We look at school locations because we want to make sure we're taking care of congestion at some of the points where the most vulnerable of our populations are affected. We used public input. Now, we did not conduct an independent survey this time around because the 2020 conditions were so different than previous years that we just relied on the public input that we'd had from previous iterations. And that totals up, the weights total up to 100%. You go to the next slide, please. So if you look at this slide, this is essentially shows the congestion management network and the average delay that was reported through the NPMRDS and INRIX data. The yellow areas are showing only about 7 seconds of delay per mile. The orange areas are showing up to about a half a minute of delay per mile. Jumping to the red areas, they're above a minute and a half delay per mile. So we're talking about the delay against what you would expect to be able to travel at free flow speed. And so you can see where most of the heavy congestion is happening. It's not all that surprising to where it shows up. It's pretty much, you probably experience it pretty much every day. Would you go to the next slide, please? In the process of looking at these, we've identified some additional segments that we wanted to add into the to the system. So for example, if you just look at, say, W.S. Young Drive, we actually added in a little section of W.S. Young in 2018. This is just continuing that a little bit further, tying things together. Looking at this map on the other side near Temple, we're proposing to add in West Avenue H. The reason is because those areas, when we looked at the data from 2019 as opposed to the 2017 data we used in the last update, those areas were showing up in the top quartile of congestion. That doesn't mean that they have terribly serious congestion, but it means that they're areas that we should start looking at. So these are some of the locations we're proposing to add in. One of the reasons we're saying our results today are preliminary is because we haven't had a chance to talk to staff about making these additions yet, but we will be doing that shortly and providing those to the staff for a final decision. The next slide, please. Now I have to apologize here. If you look, the ranking changes are actually incorrect. We pulled the wrong column of information. It's comparing a different metric. But I'll give you a brief overview of how some of these changed. But on the so our top priority ranked project for 2020 for this 2020 round was I-35 from Loop 363 to Loop 3 to North Loop 363, and you can kind of see these are pretty familiar locations from previous discussions with the rank. But these are the priority rankings for the highway segments. And then if we look at the next slide, which is the arterial segment, the number one spot is Stan Schluter Loop. So as I said, the rankings change is incorrect, but for Stan Schluter Loop actually was in about the number 4 position, and it moved up to, or it's in the number 5 position, I'm sorry. From the last evaluation, it moved up to number 1, mainly because it's not so much that its congestion rating went up significantly, but because it had a much higher crash volume in the last cycle. So that might be something to be looking at to see what's causing an increased crash rate along that segment. The second highest project was West Adams Avenue, and it actually moved up from about number 7 or 8 to number 2. As you come down the list, a lot of these pretty much make sense. Fort Hood Street was actually number 1 in 2018. It's actually improved to number 4. And then if you work your way down the list to the bottom, Avenue D, it was in 10th place last time. It actually is in 10th place again. So the change, the roadways that are showing up in the top priorities are not really that big a surprise, and the changes seem reasonable based against the data. And I think Kendra's going to ask you to take some action to advance this forward to the policy committee to discuss with them and for them to take action on as well. And there will be a full report forthcoming in the next week and a half or so.
Thank you, Jim. Are there any questions for Jim?
Jim, this is Jason, City Temple.
Yeah.
I don't need you to answer off the top of your head, but obviously I'm interested in Avenue H.
Sure.
And I'll be looking for that report of whether it was a particular intersection signal that's causing the congestion or delay, or if it was crashes.
Okay. Sure. I can't answer the question in depth off the top of my head, but
Sure.
as I looked at it to see, and I think, as I recall, I think it was more, there were a couple of hot spots along there that just that pushed the congestion score up a little bit. Remember, we're not saying that it's like in the top 10 or something. We're just saying that it's got enough. It's starting to show up in sort of
Right.
the top quarter of the list. So
Yeah.
so so it's something we ought to at least be measuring. It doesn't
Right.
necessarily indicate that there's a problem on the roadway. It's an indication that there could be a problem. And I think part of the reason it started to show up was the potential traffic we see there in the future,
That makes sense.
because the travel demand model's future forecasts for traffic on these roadways is a big part of the evaluation.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Here, Ryan, I just wanted to bring attention to the schedule that is on the screen. So although our final list of prioritized of the network is still being evaluated, we will go ahead and send that out in the coming days as soon as we receive that. It will go out for public involvement, and that includes comment from the committee as well. And then it will come back to the committee in January for their final review, final approval. So this initiation of public involvement, again, is not in agreement with necessarily the finalized list at this time, because that is still in development, but that at least cues the process to stay on track with our schedule and to allow us to go ahead and get that list out for public comment and then back to you all in January.
Thank you, Kendra. Are there any other questions on this agenda item? Seeing none, this is an action item. I'll entertain a motion to recommend approval to initiate the public involvement for the proposed CMP amendment. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. And that motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to agenda item 8. This is also a discussion and action item regarding the recommendation to approve the following resolutions to support the state's targets as the MPO performance targets for the region. This is pages 77 through 193 in your packet. Kendra?
Yes, this is an item that you may be familiar with from 2018 regarding the pavement and bridge, as well as system performance measures that are required by MPOs. We bring this back to you today, which is 2 years after, and this is also marks the midpoint review that TxDOT did a progress review of their targets. They did a reevaluation of the targets that they had set 2 years ago for their 4-year target planning cycle. And so what we have come to learn is that some of their targets have adjusted slightly. And so in 2018, the MPO had adopted to support the state targets. And due to various data sets that are quite complicated, and we are still understanding how those data sets are evaluated and the long-term effects of those data sets and those performance targets being met. And so our recommendation from staff would be to continue to support the state targets, at least for this current 4-year planning cycle, and then in 2022 to come back with possibly MPO-specific targets that are separate from the state, utilizing the assistance of a consultant. And so I will bring your attention to these resolutions that are here. And this is, again, just saying that as an MPO, we elect to support the state targets if that is the decision that the MPO committee and policy board would like to continue forward with. These are the resolutions that would state that. And then as you can see, sorry, let me get to a sheet that has some information on it that would be helpful. It's in here, one moment. Well, okay, yes, sorry. Page 87 of your packet. You will see here on the right-hand column, there is a measure that says KTMPO 2018. These are the specific measures of each of the performance measures as to where we stand. And then this 4-year adjustment column is the newly adjusted TxDOT target. So you can see in the third column to the right, where TxDOT had set their original 4-year targets, some of those have been adjusted in the second column to the right in the 4-year adjustment column. And so as you can see here, for example, pavement of interstate condition that are in good condition, KTMPO falls above that 66.5% threshold. For those state thresholds that are for poor conditions, we fall below that. So we do fall within compliance and in support of the state metrics at this time. But whether this 4-year adjustment, the 4-year target for the next 4-year planning cycle will continue to be state supported or MPO specific, we will again address that in a couple of years when we are prompted to adopt these measures again. These measures are done every 2 years for safety, performance for the pavement and bridge, as well as system performance. So we'll bring that back to you, but we just wanted to at least kind of update you on where we stand at this time and to allow you to take action on these resolutions if you so choose.
Thank you, Kendra. Are there any questions for Kendra? I'm not seeing any questions or comments. Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to recommend approval of resolutions 2021-01 and 2021-02 as the MPO performance targets for the region. I have a motion and a second. No further discussion. Everyone in favor say aye. Everyone opposed say no. And that motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to agenda item 9, this is a discussion and action item regarding the recommendation to approve resolution 2021-03 to support Hill Country Transit District's public transportation agency safety plan targets as the MPO performance targets for the region, pages 195 through 237 in your packet.
Yes, similar to the last 2 performance targets, these are also required to be adopted by the MPO to support the public transit agency in the region. And we have decided to go ahead and put all 3 of these performance targets on the same schedule just to assist us in planning going forward. Hill Country Transit District's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, also known as the PTASP, is included in the meeting packet. And so we have included a resolution to essentially adopt their PTASP as the agency safety plan for the region. Their document was submitted to the federal agency back in June, and it was also adopted by the Hill Country Board back in July. And so again, the resolution showing KTMPO support of their document is included and is requested to be recommended to the policy board later this month.
Thank you, Kendra. Any questions on this agenda item? Seeing and hearing none, I will entertain a motion to recommend approval of Resolution 2021-03 regarding Hill Country Transit District's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan and associated performance targets as the MPO performance targets for the region. I have a motion and a second. I believe, Bobby, did you make a motion? I'm trying to see who made the motion first.
It looks like it, yes.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. And that motion carries. Thank you. We'll move to agenda item 10, which is a discussion item regarding public input received through November 2020. There has been no public input received at this time. Agenda item 11 is member comments. I'll open the floor for any member comments at this time.
This is Jason, City Temple. Just wanted to let everyone know we're moving forward with our mobility master plan, and we are working with Alliance Transportation Group, as well as KPA and Maki Mobility out of Dallas. They're going to be coming up with City Temple's new municipal mobility plan, looking at a whole range of factors, and we'll be looking for a lot of public input on that. So kind of with that last slide, would certainly invite everyone's involvement as we move through this process. Thank you.
Are there any other member comments? Seeing and hearing none, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.